They called her Celine the Weaver, and though her name has slipped through the cracks of history, her work never faded. Centuries ago, in a quiet village nestled between dying woods and storm-lashed cliffs, Celine sat alone in a stone hut lit only by the flickering breath of her hearth. Her loom loomed like a skeletal god in the center of the room, warped and trembling with every pull of the thread. She never bought her materials. No merchant dared ask what she used to spin such impossibly fine, dark thread that shimmered like oil on water and bled warmth like a living thing. It was said she wove by moonlight and never during the day. Villagers swore her cloth whispered. Hung fabric swayed in the absence of wind. Some claimed to see faces ripple across bolts of black silk. Others swore she never blinked. Then one day, she stopped coming to market. A local boy, daring and foolish, crept into her home under the shield of a thunderstorm. He never spoke again. They found him by the fireplace, hands shredded by splinters from a broken shuttle, lips stitched shut with golden thread. The loom remained. Abandoned. Silent. But the fabric remained too. One bolt, only one, survived the fire set by the fearful villagers. It was recovered by a collector decades later, mislabeled as mourning silk, from an unknown region. It passed through private hands, sealed in obsidian boxes, never catalogued for long. Wherever it traveled, its bearer vanished. Always without a trace. Some said the thread remembered its maker and longed for new hands. Others said it had never stopped weaving, even when idle. Time moved on. The world modernized. Tailors stopped sewing by candlelight. Looms gave way to machines. But the fabric, always wrapped in velvet and marked with an unidentifiable crest, a stylized needle piercing an eye, endured. Waiting. And so it arrives again. A nondescript package on a rain-drenched doorstep in a forgotten quarter of the city. No return address. Only the crest, embossed in wax the color of old blood. Inside, a bolt of perfect fabric. Blacker than ink, yet faintly iridescent in shadow. Cool to the touch. Breathing, almost. Waiting for the hands that would shape it. Hands that would bleed. The rain had been falling all morning. The old tailor's shop sat quietly at the end of a narrow cobbled street, tucked between a closed bookstore and a crumbling apartment block. Few people passed by these days. The wooden sign above the door, once painted in gold, now hung crooked, the name faded to barely a whisper, Vantrell and Company, tailoring by hand. Inside, Iris Vantrell worked in silence. She was in her 60s, but age had not slowed her fingers. Her silver hair was always tied back neatly, and her sharp gray eyes missed nothing. The radio hummed softly in the background, some old jazz tune playing just above the sound of raindrops on glass. Her shop smelled of linen, cedarwood, and faint traces of lavender soap. On the counter sat 3 half-finished suits and a box of buttons. She picked up a jacket, held it to the light, and frowned. Too wide at the shoulder. She murmured to herself. She reached for the chalk, marked a line, and began to unpick the seam. Her hands moved quickly, years of repetition making every stitch feel like second nature. She had been sewing since she was a girl, taught by her mother, who had taught herself during the war. Now there were few like her left. The city didn't want handmade anymore. It wanted cheap, fast, disposable. But Iris refused to give in. Her customers were loyal, if few. She did quiet work, wedding suits, mourning coats, rare commissions from the theater district. Each piece made with care. Each one built to last. She liked the quiet. It kept the world out. The silence let her think. That was when the knock came. 3 quick taps. Soft, but sharp enough to cut through the rain and music. Iris looked up. Strange. The shop was closed today. She hadn't expected anyone. She wiped her hands on a cloth, walked to the door, and opened it. No one was there. Only a package, square and flat, wrapped in deep blue silk and tied with twine. A wax seal held the knot in place, stamped with a symbol she didn't recognize, a needle through an eye. She picked it up slowly. The package was light, but the air around it felt heavier somehow, like stepping into a storm just before the lightning hits. There was no note, no name, no return address. Iris brought it inside and laid it on her cutting table. She hesitated for a long moment before breaking the seal. The twine slipped loose like it had been waiting. The silk unfolded easily, and inside was a bolt of fabric like she had never seen. It was black, but not empty. It shimmered in the light, with hints of deep violet and blue, like an oil slick. When she touched it, it felt strangely warm. Soft as air, but dense like water. It didn't behave like any cloth she knew. It didn't fray. It didn't wrinkle. And it didn't reflect light, it swallowed it. She leaned in closer. Was it breathing? Of course not. She shook her head. Nonsense. But she couldn't look away. Iris took the bolt into her hands and turned it over, inspecting it carefully. There were no seams, no frayed edges. No tag or label. It was as if it had been made only moments ago, and made perfectly. Despite herself, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Inspiration. She cleared off the long table in the center of the shop and laid the fabric out flat. It stretched wider than she expected, almost too wide to have been inside the small package. The edges remained straight and smooth, as though cut by a machine. She ran her fingers across it again. It felt alive somehow. Not pulsing or moving, but aware. Like it knew it was being touched. The room dimmed slightly. A cloud passed over the sun outside. Iris looked toward the window, then back to the fabric. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, she muttered, someone went to a lot of trouble. She fetched her sketchbook from a drawer and flipped to a clean page. The pencil moved almost on its own, lines forming with surprising ease. She usually took her time designing a suit, but now, the ideas came faster than she could keep up. A high-collared jacket with tapered sleeves. Matching trousers with a narrow cut. Double-stitched lapels. The kind of piece that would stop people in their tracks. Something elegant. Timeless. Something powerful. By nightfall, she had the pattern ready. She should have gone home. Her knees ached. Her tea had gone cold hours ago. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. With hands that trembled slightly, not from age, but from excitement, she made the first cut. The scissors glided through the fabric like it was paper. No resistance. No sound. Piece by piece, she carved it with precision. Her eyes never strayed. Her hands never slipped. Every corner matched perfectly. Every line felt inevitable. She didn't look at the clock until she was already sewing. It was past midnight. Outside, the rain had stopped. A fog had rolled in instead, pressing against the shop windows like a curious animal. Inside, the only light came from a small desk lamp, casting soft shadows on the walls. Her needle moved faster than it had in years. She didn't even need a thimble. No pricks, no snags. The thread, too, was strange. She didn't remember choosing it, but it was already threaded through her finest needle, dark as ink but catching hints of silver as it moved. The air smelled faintly of something new. Not lavender. Not cedar. Something warm. Like skin. Still, Iris worked on. When the jacket was finished, she held it up and stared. It was beautiful. No, more than that. It was perfect. The lines were sharp, the texture rich, and it held its shape like it had been sculpted instead of sewn. She turned it in the light, marveling at how the shadows played across the surface. There was something regal about it, and something strange. She reached out and slipped one arm into the sleeve. It fit. Of course it fit. She had measured herself without thinking, her hands and eyes moving with a knowledge she hadn't known she still had. She slid the jacket on, one arm and then the other. A rush of warmth spread through her chest. Her back straightened. Her fingers tingled. She stood taller than she had in years. The pain in her knees vanished. Her shoulders no longer ached. She moved to the mirror near the door and stared at her reflection. And blinked. Something was different. Her face looked sharper. her jaw more defined. The fine lines around her eyes seemed less visible. She leaned closer. Her irises shimmered with a faint gold hue she had never seen before. She pulled the jacket tight. She smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt strong. Not just healthy, but strong. She turned, admiring the cut of the fabric from every angle. It clung to her like a second skin, perfectly tailored. She couldn't remember the last time she had worn something that made her feel this, alive. Then she heard it. Just for a second. A whisper. She froze. Her eyes darted to the corners of the room. The shop was silent. The radio was off. The clock ticked softly. Nothing else. But she had heard it. A voice. Close. Soft as silk on skin. It had said her name. Iris. She stepped back from the mirror. The warmth in her chest was still there, but now it felt different. Heavier. Slower. She removed the jacket carefully and folded it on the counter. Her hands were shaking. I need sleep, she said aloud, trying to ground herself in the sound of her own voice. She turned off the lamp and stepped into the back room where she kept a small cot for late nights. But she didn't sleep. Even with her eyes closed, the suit lingered in her mind. And somewhere in the darkness behind her thoughts, something else stirred. The next morning, Iris woke earlier than usual. The rain had stopped, and pale light crept in through the lace curtains of her shop's back room. She sat up slowly, her joints surprisingly loose. Normally, she would need a minute to stretch before getting out of bed, but not today. She blinked, confused. She felt, well, not just well. Energized. Refreshed. She stood, walked to the mirror beside the door, and looked at herself. There it was again, that subtle glow in her eyes. A golden tint, like sunlight catching a drop of honey. Her skin looked clearer, less sunken. She leaned closer and touched her cheek. No way, she whispered. Then she turned to the suit. It was still folded neatly on the counter, untouched since last night. But it looked different somehow. Not in shape or color, but in presence. It felt like it was watching her. Waiting. Iris hesitated only a moment before picking it up and slipping the jacket on once more. Warmth spread through her arms and chest like before. Her fingers felt steady. Her heartbeat slowed, even out. She walked to the front of the shop and flipped the closed sign to open, with a kind of grace she hadn't felt in years. At 10 o'clock sharp, her first customer walked in, Mrs. Hedger, a widow who had been ordering morning clothes from Iris for nearly a decade. Good morning, Iris, she said, tugging her umbrella closed. You're looking quite radiant today. Iris blinked, surprised. Thank you. That's kind of you. I mean it, Mrs. Hedger said, squinting at her. There's something different about you. Iris forced a smile. Maybe it's the lighting. They moved into the fitting room. Iris guided her client with steady hands, her measurements precise and quick. Faster than usual. She didn't even need to double-check her work. The numbers came to her like they were floating in the air. She could see them, actual numbers hovering faintly in her vision, as if the world had become a blueprint. It wasn't just the suit. It was doing something to her mind. When Mrs. Hedger left, she turned and looked back. That suit, she said slowly. Is that a new design? Iris hesitated, then nodded. I've never seen anything quite like it, the woman added. It's striking. As the door closed behind her, Iris stood very still. She looked down at her arms. The fabric glinted slightly in the light. She ran her hands along the sleeves and let out a shaky breath. She felt like a conductor, like someone who could control more than cloth and thread. Like someone who could see the hidden stitching in everything. That day, she completed 2 full commissions, faster than she'd ever worked in her life. Every seam was perfect. Every dart aligned exactly. She didn't even need to take breaks. Her hands didn't cramp. Her back didn't ache. But when she finally sat down to rest, something strange happened. Her reflection in the window didn't match her movements. She turned her head slightly, but in the glass, her mirrored self tilted it a fraction too slow. Her stomach tightened. She stood up, walked closer. The reflection adjusted just in time. Too perfect. She pressed her fingers to the glass. Was it watching her back? No. That was ridiculous. She turned away and tried to shake the feeling. But it lingered, prickling in the back of her mind like a thread snagging on a nail. That night, she laid the jacket carefully in her workroom and closed the door. Just before bed, she paused in front of the mirror once more. Her eyes brighter. Her smile wider. She didn't feel like herself. But she didn't feel bad. She felt better. The dreams started that night. Iris was standing in her shop, alone, sewing in the dark. The fabric beneath her hands was the same strange cloth, the black, shifting material that drank the light. But when she looked up from her work, the walls were gone. She was surrounded by mirrors. Hundreds of them. Tall, thin, warped. Some clear as ice, others fogged and cracked. In each one she saw herself, but different versions. Some older, some younger. Some with hollow eyes. Others grinning wide, too wide. One version had no face at all, just skin stretched smooth and tight. And every reflection wore the suit. She turned slowly, trying to find the way out, but the mirrors closed in around her. The sound of a loom thudded somewhere in the distance, steady as a heartbeat. When she woke, she was standing in the middle of her workshop, fully dressed. In the suit. The needle was still in her hand, threaded and warm. A torn piece of cloth lay at her feet, something she didn't recognize. Not part of any order. Not from any customer. She dropped the needle and backed away. Had she been sleepwalking? The suit clung to her tightly, warm against her skin. She tore it off and folded it, locking it in the supply cabinet with trembling hands. She didn't wear it the next day. But she thought about it. Constantly. By afternoon, a customer came in, a young man, mid-20s, with anxious eyes and a rumpled blazer. He needed something fitted for a job interview. Iris nodded and started the measurements. As she worked, something strange happened. She began to see through him. Not literally, but deeper than surface. She could feel his fear, the nerves in his spine, the twitch in his fingers when he spoke about his big chance. She saw that his jacket wasn't his. It had belonged to someone else. His father? Brother? The thread of his life unwound before her like a story on fast forward. She knew things she shouldn't. She took 3 steps back, her breath quickening. "What's wrong?" the man asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Sorry. Just dizzy for a second." She rushed through the fitting and sent him on his way. That night, she didn't even try to resist. She unlocked the cabinet, slipped the suit on, and let it happen. She sewed like a woman possessed. 3 new garments appeared before dawn, stitched so fast they felt like they'd grown from her fingertips. But this time, she didn't stop when her fingers bled. She didn't feel pain anymore. Instead, she felt something stronger, a whisper behind her ear, a breath on her neck, a guiding hand just out of sight. It wasn't a voice exactly, but it wanted her to keep going. And she did. Each stitch was like a spell. Each cut a decision. Each finished piece made her feel more real, more awake, more complete. But in the corners of her vision, shadows moved. Small at first. Flickers. Shifts in the fabric of the air itself. Then larger. A glimpse of a figure watching her from the mirror. A shape in the doorway that disappeared when she turned her head. The suit gave her power, but it also pulled things closer. Things that shouldn't be here. By the end of the week, Iris no longer needed a mirror to feel them. They were inside the walls now. Inside her. And the worst part? She didn't want them to go. The next few days passed in a blur. Iris barely ate. She barely slept. The suit never left her body. She told herself it was because it helped her work. She told herself it was temporary. But the truth was simpler. She couldn't take it off. Not physically. It came off easily enough. But when she wasn't wearing it, she felt hollow. Small. Like a shadow of herself. Her hands shook. Her skin went pale. Her thoughts splintered. And the whispers got louder. They came in the quiet moments, between stitches, between breaths. Sometimes they were just echoes of her name. Other times they were commands, wrapped in flattery. You're an artist, Iris. The world doesn't deserve you. Let go. Become what you were meant to be. She stopped listening to the radio. The jazz no longer soothed her. She stopped calling her sister. The last time she did, her voice had come out strange, too smooth, too sweet, like something trying to sound like Iris. She worked faster than ever before, producing stunning suits and gowns. But none of them felt finished unless they used that fabric. She still had more of it, somehow. The bolt never seemed to shrink. Each time she cut a piece, it replenished itself, like it was growing. One morning, while taking out the trash behind the shop, she saw something strange. A man stood across the street, sketching the storefront. He was tall, maybe in his 30s, with dark, curly hair and wire-framed glasses. His coat was too light for the cold. Around his neck hung a vintage camera, and his notebook was thick with pages. Iris watched him, heart thudding. The man looked up and smiled. He crossed the street and stopped just outside her shop. "Apologies if I startled you," he said, his voice gentle. "I've been trying to find this place for days." "You're Iris Ventrell, yes?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers twitched. "Yes." "Wonderful. My name's Ezra. I'm a textile historian. I teach at the university, but I've spent the last few years researching a very specific pattern of fabric. Rare. Usually undocumented. Passed around through anonymous sales or private commissions. Black, with color that shimmers like oil." He paused. "Like the suit you're wearing." Iris's breath caught. She pulled her coat tighter, though the suit didn't show beneath it. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. Ezra smiled again, but this time there was sadness in it. "You do. I've found records going back over 100 years. This fabric, it shows up under different names. Different cities. Always wrapped in silk, no return address. And always, it changes the people who wear it." Her hands balled into fists. "You're mistaken. I wish I were," he said quietly. "But the signs are all there. You haven't been sleeping. You've been working faster than ever. Your reflection doesn't always match you, does it?" She flinched. That was a detail she hadn't shared with anyone. Not even herself. He held up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." "I don't need help," she snapped. "I'm not some case study." Ezra didn't move. His voice softened further. "The fabric isn't just strange, Iris. It's cursed. It's alive. The old stories, those who wore it too long began to forget themselves. They stopped being people. They became something else." I said I'm fine. Her voice shook. For the first time in weeks, she felt fear. Real fear. Because he wasn't wrong. Ezra nodded slowly. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be at the university archive. Room 217. He slipped a card into her mailbox and walked away without another word. Iris watched him go, heart pounding, the shadows beneath her skin twisting like worms. That night, she burned the card. But she couldn't burn the doubt. And when she looked in the mirror again, her reflection smiled before she did. By the end of the week, Iris had stopped recognizing her own voice. It was still her mouth. Still her tongue. But the words came out too smooth, too measured. There was no hesitation anymore, only certainty. Even when she wasn't sure what she was saying. The suit fit like it was made of skin. Not over her body, but through it. It fused. Thread by thread. And the whispers no longer waited for silence. They came in the middle of conversations, slicing through her thoughts like knives wrapped in velvet. They don't understand you. Ezra is a thief. He wants what's yours. Cut him out. She avoided her reflection now. Too many eyes. In the mirror, she saw herself moving before she did. Her smile too wide, her fingers too long. She caught herself stroking the suit in the dark, humming lullabies she hadn't heard since childhood. Sometimes she found herself in the workshop with no memory of starting. Scissors in hand. Fabric in pieces. Other times she woke up with new designs already drawn. Not in pencil. In ink. Ink the color of dried blood. Then one evening, something broke. It was almost closing time when a woman came in, a college student. Nervous. Quiet. She wanted a blazer for a public speaking event, something that made her feel confident. Iris smiled. Too wide. Of course, she said smoothly. Let's take your measurements. The girl hesitated. Is everything okay? Better than okay, Iris said, and her voice had a second echo to it, thin, silken, slithering. She led the girl into the back. The shadows followed. But then, just as her fingers reached for the measuring tape, something jerked her back. Not physically. Internally. Like someone pulling a thread from her spine. Don't do this, said her real voice. Quiet. Faint. This isn't you. She blinked. The girl was watching her, eyes wide. Ma'am? She asked. Iris stumbled back a step, breath short. Her vision blurred. I'm sorry, she said. I don't think I can help you. The girl left in a hurry, clutching her coat. The bell above the door rang like a scream. Iris backed into the workroom, panting. She tore the jacket off and threw it across the table. It slithered as it landed. Not literally, but the fabric moved in ways it shouldn't. The seams rippled. The shoulders breathed. She turned and opened the cabinet, planning to shove it inside again, lock it away. But the cabinet was full. Dozens of garments. All made from the same black, iridescent fabric. She didn't remember making them. Some were coats. Some were robes. Some were stitched into strange shapes that made no logical sense. Spirals, loops, layered folds that defied physics. They pulsed with energy. Not light. Not color. Hunger. She slammed the door shut and stumbled back. Her head spun. Her fingers twitched. She had to do something. She had to fight this. Before she lost herself completely. And she knew the only person who might have any answers. Ezra. The next day, Iris stood at the door of room 217 at the university archives. She was trembling. Not from fear. From withdrawal. Her skin itched. Her voice came in static bursts. The suit wasn't on her, but it wanted to be. Inside, Ezra looked up from a stack of dusty tomes. His eyes widened when he saw her. You came, he said quietly. I need to know where it came from, she said. The fabric. Ezra didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and motioned for her to sit. He opened a binder filled with copied letters, old photographs, fragments of journal entries. It's called Nyxweave, he said. Named after the Greek goddess of night. But that's just one name. It's older. Much older. He flipped to a faded map. There are stories of a village, long gone, where the fabric was first spun. The material came from something unnatural. Not cotton, not silk. Some say it was drawn from shadows. Others say it was harvested from the space between dreams. He paused. In every version, the fabric feeds off its wearer. It enhances them. Makes them stronger. Sharper. But over time, it replaces them. Wears them. Turns them into vessels. Vessels for what? Iris asked, voice tight. Ezra looked at her, his expression grave. Something that remembers being human, but isn't anymore. Iris swallowed hard. Is there a way to stop it? Ezra nodded slowly. Maybe. You have to unmake what you've made. Every piece. Every thread. You have to destroy them. And you have to do it soon. Why? Because if the suit becomes you entirely, he hesitated, there'll be nothing left to save. The fire refused to catch. Iris stood in the alley behind her shop, hands trembling as she held a lighter to the hem of one of the cursed garments. A robe she didn't remember making. The fabric curled, blackened slightly, and then unburned itself. As if time reversed the damage. She tried again. Same result. Ezra had warned her this might happen. It won't burn like normal cloth. The longer it's been worn, the more it defends itself. But there's one thing it fears, being cut apart with intention. Each thread pulled with focus. Purpose. If you want to kill it, you have to seam rip it into silence. Iris returned inside, locking the back door. Her hands already ached. Her head pounded. The suit, which she'd forced herself not to wear for 2 days now, seemed to call out from the supply closet like a child in the dark. But she ignored it. She sat at her workbench, laid out a seam ripper, scissors, and needle extractors. Tools she'd used 1,000 times. But never like this. She picked the smallest piece first, a bolero jacket she barely remembered sewing. Its lines were perfect, almost mathematically impossible. As she brought the seam ripper to its hem, she felt something shift inside it. The fabric twitched. "No," she whispered. "Not this time." She pierced the seam. Ripped through it. The cloth shrieked. Not out loud, not quite. But in her mind, a sound like ripping silk and screaming wind blasted through her skull. Her nose bled. Her teeth clenched. But she kept going. Seam by seam, thread by thread, she pulled it apart. When it was done, when every shred lay in limp pieces on the floor, she fell backward in her chair, gasping. The shadows in the room receded. Just a little. She wiped the blood from her face and stood barely. "That's one," she whispered. Then she reached for the next. The days blurred. Each garment fought back harder than the last. Some screamed. Some begged. Others tried to distract her, filling her mind with memories that weren't hers. Whispers of beauty. Of power. Of immortality. One jacket made her see her dead mother standing at the foot of her bed, smiling, holding out her arms. Another played music that had never existed, haunting, impossible chords that made her heart ache for no reason she could name. Still, she worked. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat much. And each time she destroyed another piece, she felt a little more like herself again. Her voice returned to normal. Her reflection matched her movements. But the original suit, her suit, was still locked away. Untouched. Waiting. Watching. 3 nights before the full moon, Ezra visited again. He brought her tea and a pile of books filled with binding rituals and cleansing rites. Most were useless. A few gave her ideas. "You're close," he said, eyes scanning the frayed remains of the garments piled in the fireplace. "But the original piece, that's the core. That's the seed." "I know," Iris said, her voice hoarse. "But I can't destroy it like the others. It's part of me. It knows me. Then you'll have to unmake it in a different way," Ezra said softly. "You'll have to take it apart while wearing it." Iris stared at him. "You're kidding." "It's the only way," he said. "Let it attach fully, then sever every thread from within. That's suicide." Ezra didn't respond. She knew he was right. If she didn't do it, it would keep calling. Keep growing. It might even find another wearer. No. She wouldn't let that happen. Not to anyone else. That night, Iris stood in her workshop in silence. The suit lay before her on the table, pristine and gleaming. She stared at it like one might stare at a venomous snake. Beautiful. Deadly. She inhaled slowly, then slipped it on. It welcomed her like a lover, like a mother, like a god. Warmth surged through her veins. The world sharpened into clarity. She could hear the threads of time. She could see through the walls. She felt powerful, eternal. "You've come home," the whispers sighed. "Why leave now?" She reached for the seam ripper with steady fingers. The suit shuddered. It knew. She brought the blade to her wrist cuff and tore through the first seam. And the world went black. Darkness swallowed her. Not the absence of light, this was heavier. Thicker. Like ink spilled into her mind. Iris couldn't feel her body. She floated inside a vast, silent space stitched together from whispers and fragments of herself. Her thoughts weren't her own anymore. They came threaded with lies, illusions, memories stretched and twisted into something dangerous. Then a voice. You wore me. Now I wear you. It came from everywhere. And from within. She saw herself, or something like her, standing across the void. Tall. Poised. Wearing the suit like a crown. Her smile was calm, precise. I made you, Iris hissed. You finished me, said the reflection. There is no Iris without the suit now. Let go. I'll protect what's left of you. You'll never hurt again. Never fear. Never age. Iris shook her head. You're not real. The figure stepped closer. Oh, but I am. I'm the part of you that doesn't flinch. That doesn't break. You were always afraid of your own greatness. But not me. The darkness behind it rippled, and dozens of faces emerged. All wearing her suit. All slightly different. All hers. Designs she hadn't sewn. Versions of herself that never were. I've worn many before you, the suit whispered. But you were the finest. The cleanest cut. No, she said. You're just fabric. I'm the needle, it said. That thread's identity. And you're unraveling. Pain surged through her mind, a stitch ripping open. Memories flooded in. The day she opened the shop. The first time she laughed so hard she cried. Her sister, painting stars on her ceiling when they were kids. Her hands sewing her first dress, proud and clumsy. These were real. These were hers. And the suit was trying to drown them. No, Iris said aloud, forcing the memory forward like a blade. The reflection flickered. She reached into the void, and the seam ripper was in her hand again. She didn't question how. She felt where the threads of the suit had merged into her mind, silky chains coiled around memories, muscles, beliefs. She plunged the ripper in and pulled. Pain seared through her skull. The suit screamed. Not in her head. Out loud. She was back, on the floor of her workshop, thrashing, clawing at her chest as the fabric fought to stay whole. Ezra burst through the door, shouting her name. She didn't hear him. She was somewhere between flesh and fiber, between soul and stitch. One more seam. She reached up and tore the final thread loose at the nape of her neck. Everything stopped. The suit collapsed around her like shed skin. A husk. The lights flickered. Iris gasped for breath. Her body was soaked in sweat, her hands bloody from clutching too hard. Ezra dropped to his knees beside her. Iris! Look at me! Are you still in there? She opened her eyes. They were hers again. I'm here, she whispered. It's gone. They both looked at the remains of the suit. Just cloth now. Black. Still. Harmless. Ezra nodded slowly. Then let's make sure it stays that way. They burned it at sunrise. Together. The flames took it this time. Real flames, orange and hungry. The fabric crackled and curled like dead leaves. The smell was like ozone and ash, and the end of something that never should have been. Iris watched until the last scrap turned to smoke. She didn't speak. Neither did Ezra. Some things didn't need words. The suit was ash. But Iris still felt it. Not as power. Not as whispers. Just echoes. A weight in her chest when she touched a spool of thread. A flutter in her fingers when fabric slid across her palm. Weeks passed. The shop reopened. She took small jobs at first, hemming pants, patching sleeves, letting out seams. She avoided anything black. She avoided mirrors. She didn't draw. Ezra checked in regularly. He never pressed, never asked for details. Sometimes he just brought coffee and sat with her while she worked. It helped. So did the silence. For the first time in months, the silence was hers. No voices. No promises. Just breath and motion, and the steady rhythm of her hands. She kept the ruined tools, the blood-stained seam ripper, the scorched scissors, in a box beneath the counter. Not as a warning, as a reminder. She had faced something ancient, something hungry, and she'd won. But it hadn't been without cost. One night, a regular customer, Mrs. Langston, asked her if she could recreate a jacket Iris had once made. A masterpiece, she called it. Elegant. Sharp. You wore it in the window last fall, remember? Iris smiled gently. I don't make things like that anymore. Mrs. Langston tilted her head. Why not, dear? It was divine. Iris's smile faltered, then returned. Because beauty isn't worth becoming someone else. The woman didn't understand. But that was okay. Later that evening, Iris closed the shop early. She went into the back room and stood in front of the work table. It was time. She reached for her sketchbook, one she hadn't opened since the unraveling. Dust clung to the corners. The pages were stiff, but her pencil still moved. The first design she drew was simple. A tunic. Hand-stitched embroidery. A patchwork sleeve made from donated remnants. Nothing elegant. Nothing sharp. But honest. It felt good. Not powerful, but real. She ran her fingers across the page and felt tears well up. Not from fear. Not from grief. From relief. She could still create. Without darkness. Without losing herself. That night she dreamed. Not of the suit. Not of its whispering mouths or endless void. She dreamed of thread, warm and gold, weaving through stars. A loom at the center of the sky. And her own hands, calloused and steady, stitching light into form. She woke with tears on her cheeks. Smiling. The next morning, Iris stepped into her workshop and locked the front door. A sign hung on the glass. Closed for creation. For the first time since she opened the shop, she wasn't making something for a client. She was making it for herself. Not to impress. Not to disappear into. But to remember. She gathered scraps from the donation bin, soft denim, faded cotton, lace remnants from wedding gowns that never made it to the altar. Each piece had a story, a past, a life. She didn't sketch. She felt. Her fingers moved like they'd always known this path. Not the way they had under the suit's influence, robotic, perfect, too clean, but with natural rhythm, mistakes included. She pricked her finger twice. She laughed. The fabric spoke. Not in whispers, not in madness, but in memory. A patch of sunflower print linen reminded her of her grandmother's apron. The flannel square of a child's coat still smelled faintly of cinnamon. She worked all day. Into the night. Then the next day. And the next. Ezra visited and saw her through the window. She waved but didn't invite him in. Not yet. The piece wasn't finished. It wasn't just a coat, or a dress, or a tunic. It was everything. The mistakes she'd made. The people she'd hurt. The power she'd tasted. The person she nearly became. And the one she was now. When it was done, she stood back and looked at it on the dress form. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. The seams were visible. The edges uneven. But it was alive. And completely hers. A week later, Iris hung the garment in the front window. She didn't put a price tag on it. Just a note. Made from memory. Not for sale. Customers stopped to stare. Some shook their heads and moved on. Others came in and sat quietly, asking nothing, just smiling. Word spread. Soon, people began bringing her scraps with stories. A cuff from a grandfather's shirt. A torn ribbon from a dancer's first solo. A fabric rose from a mother's funeral veil. Iris began stitching these into a growing tapestry. Not one meant to cover or hide, but to honor. She named it the Honest Cloak. And when people asked what it did, she said, "It reminds you who you are." On a cool spring morning, Ezra returned. He stood beside the tapestry, tracing the edge of a silk triangle. "Feels like you," he said softly. "It is me." Iris replied. He looked at her. How do you feel? She thought for a moment, then answered, Like I've come undone, and stitched myself back better. Ezra smiled. You didn't let it win. No, Iris said, turning to the window, where the honest cloak swayed gently in the breeze. I let myself win.